The Galien Foundation fosters, recognizes, and rewards excellence in scientific innovation to improve the human condition.
André Malraux said once in one of his novels, "Une vie humaine ne vaut rien, mais rien ne vaut une vie humaine." Human life is worth nothing, but nothing is worth a human life. All these men and women are trying to save human lives. Is there anything more noble than that?
The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year Best Pharmaceutical Product, Best Biotechnology Product, Best Product for Orphan Rare Diseases, Best Medical Technology, Best Digital Health Solution, Best Incubator Accelerator Equity, Best Startup. Around the globe, the Prix Galien is considered as the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for the industry, mobilizing an unrivaled network of Nobel laureates and top biomedical scientists. The Galien Foundation manages an independent, cross-functional, and geographically diverse program of events and sponsorship to brand the best of the best in new medicines and diagnostics. The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Roy Vagelos Pro Bono Humanum Award for Global Health Equity is bestowed to an individual, a company, an academic institution, or a non-governmental agency that has helped to improve the human condition through the application of biopharmaceutical science to problems of developing or underserved populations worldwide.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
Staging this event in Africa is a significant statement that science and innovation are needed as much here in Africa as anywhere else.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Lester, and I have the privilege of moderating our discussion this afternoon. And I want to welcome you to the Galien Foundation Week of Biomedical Innovation webinars here in New York. The objective this week is to provide additional content and background for our largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held this Thursday or tomorrow here in New York. We have developed this webinar series to give our Galien nominees for Best Pharmaceutical, Best Biotech, Best Medtech, Best Digital Health Solutions, Best Startup and Accelerator Incubator investor category greater visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record 178 nominees for our 7 categories, from nearly 150 companies covering 15 diverse therapeutic areas, ranging from cancer to cardiology and neurosciences to infectious diseases and very rare genetic diseases and vaccines. We will be looking closely at these areas throughout the week. In the Best MedTech category, which is really our focus today, we are holding 3 webinars due to the large number, 28 nominated products representing this important field. This webinar in the next hour we've allotted is devoted to the nominees and other medtech devices and diagnostics. And what we'll cover today relates to the central question, what's Medtech's innovation doing around urgent need for faster diagnoses and more targeted, less invasive treatments to address the growing burden of disease that are chronic and requiring a strong emphasis on helping patients manage their conditions proactively. Now, the webinar will include some time for all of you, the audience, to ask questions to the panelists. The questions will be then forwarded to myself, and then we will through the chat link, and then we can ask those questions as they come up. So let's begin. I should just mention before we get started, actually, that there is an accessible link. It's a 100-word statement submitted by each of the companies on behalf of their products, and it's available for viewing during this webcast if you want to learn more. So now let's get right into our discussion, and we'll have an opportunity to meet and introduce our panelists. What I'm going to ask is for Jennifer and for Steve to take a couple of minutes as we begin our discussion to introduce yourselves, to introduce perhaps your company, its mission in the medtech industry. And perhaps, Jennifer, I'll ask you first, if you don't mind, to take a few minutes to introduce yourself. So thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lester. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jennifer Sipple, and I am the Vice President of Marketing and Home Operations for Outset Medical, the manufacturer of the Tablo hemodialysis system. And I'll talk to you a little bit about, the central question in today's conversation is really centered around the patient and how we really drive an impact in a patient's life, especially in managing their chronic conditions. And kidney disease is a very challenging condition for patients. Quite frankly, dialysis, which is where we focus, is one of the largest and most expensive and least changed sectors of healthcare. We really haven't seen tremendous innovation in dialysis in more than 30 years. And when I say, expensive, what I'm talking about is overall in the US, patients on Medicare represent about 1% are on dialysis. However, the cost of delivering that dialysis is about 7% of the overall Medicare budget. So as you can imagine, sort of number of patients, cost of care, really out of sync. And so the Tablo hemodialysis system was really designed to take a tech-forward, sort of modern approach to how we think about this care and be able to move that care closer to the patient in the patient's home and enable the patient to be able to take care of themselves, which quite frankly is really what patients are looking for. How do they take back more control and more of the opportunity to improve their quality of life? So, we are a company based in the Silicon Valley, so no surprise that there's a strong tech influence, data, and the opportunity. But the other piece of being in the Silicon Valley that I think you and I can all relate to is really the consumer experience. And at the end of the day, we're all sort of, we learn the consumer experience through the consumer products that we have. And so our take on how we really access patients was to give them the simplest, easiest to use consumer level experience to really enable them and empower them to be successful at home in taking care of themselves and being able to perform this life-saving, almost, kind of every other day procedure that most of these patients are on. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for leading the conversation today, Dr. Lester, and I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. And as we get started, Stephen, maybe you could take a few minutes as well to introduce yourself and your product to the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Lester. My name is Steve Eyre. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Solidex, and we're in the acute pain management business. Our goal is to become the standard of care for acute pain management. That means for typical operations. Today, it's mostly orthopedic. And I'm in this particular setting, I'm thinking the reasons why I'm actually doing this and it's, I think, well aligned with the Galien mission. And that is, we're looking to simultaneously accomplish a couple of goals, but requires a perspective change. The first is, if you look at the inspecificity of taking blood out of your body for infections, we would all agree, I think everyone on this group would agree, it's rather brutal, it's savage and rather primitive. What does that have to do with pain management? Well, with the thinking about the general application of general anesthesia and its accompanying risks for many, 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 many procedures, it's overused today. And we believe the time will come when regional anesthesia will take its place as a primary supplier of acute pain management. This is something that exists today. And for orthopedic procedures like a shoulder repair or replacement, a hip or a knee, these are becoming very common, particularly as our population grows older. What's the paradigm shift? The paradigm shift is to allow a patient to approach midday, receive the anesthesia in less than 2 minutes, go into the procedure with very light multimodal or maybe perhaps only regional anesthesia, and to emerge and be 100% pain-free for a minimum of 5 days. That's available today in our Solidex Facile product. And in the words of an orthopedic surgeon I spoke with about my femur, which broke not so many years ago, he said to me, I like seeing pink faces, happy patients, and met expectations. As a surgeon, that's number one. Instead, what we have is a practice which provides patients that are already somewhat dependent on on opioid painkillers prior to surgery. They were given general anesthesia, and then post-surgery, it's still an alarming problem. For this country, for North America, the Stanford Lancet folks pegged it at 1.2 million deaths over the next decade. Now, in the past, I've been invited to be on boards for substances which could control addiction that might get there in 20 years. Solidex Facile is here today, and at leading hospitals and institutions in the United States, throughout the Middle East, India, Japan, and Taiwan. Our goal is to become the standard of care so that a patient, as I mentioned before, can arrive near noon, go home after a 40-minute procedure and 40 minutes of recovery instead of 4 hours of recovery. That's Solidex. I'm Steve Eyre. I've been involved in biotech for a very long time. This is my most exciting project, and I'm so honored to be nominated as Best Medical Technology with such wonderful colleagues as we have here among us today. Thank you, Dr. Lester.
Well, appreciate that, Steve, and Jennifer as well. But I was going to ask you a question, Steve, particularly about Solidex Facile. So what's the unique innovation around it? Like what makes that sort of standard of care for acute pain management? What's
I would expect that with the letters behind your name, Doctor. The uniqueness is the 2 minutes. We have 17 patents around a catheter which can be inserted, and we have data to show that it's no more time than a needle. And instead of just being a needle, it's a needle over the catheter that is multi-ported, it avoids downstream occlusion. It can be placed in such a brief period of time that anesthesiologists, 53,000 or so that are in the United States, more and more and more of them will use it because it's the easiest thing to use. Years ago, Dr. Lester, someone told me at one of the early Medtech conferences that nobody will use it in a clinic unless it's the easiest thing to use. No one has confidence when they're fumbling. And this is such a straightforward and easy catheter to use. We're seeing some remarkable accretion rates in the number of people using the product. Now, there's a lot of features that allow that to happen. I'm not here to go over those today, but it's really remarkable that we have this space, and we're delighted to have a team of doctors that generated this out of a 7,000 patient database that they started with the regional anesthesia and found it better than anything that could be found anywhere else. So that's my sense is it's time for regional anesthesia to take its place.
No, I get it. It's interesting, and maybe Jennifer and Steve think about this as well as I asked Jennifer the question. It's challenging and it can be lonely working in this medtech space, right? Trying to take a product from ideation all the way through to commercialization. And medtech inventors are all innovators and inventors face some challenges going along the way. And can you give us insights, maybe Jennifer, into some of the challenges you faced while trying to bring your innovative healthcare solution to the market, and give us some advice how you might have overcome some of these? And Steve, I'll probably ask you the same question so you can think about that as she's answering that.
Thank you for the extra time.
Yeah.
So
as we approached the challenge of delivering dialysis in a way that patients could care for themselves, because again, very complex. You were literally cleaning a person's entire system of blood, right? You were taking all the blood out of their body, you were acting as their kidneys and filtering it. Doing this in the home was no small task. Now, there were devices and there are other devices that do this, but there was so much complexity around how they were addressing that, right? It required volumes of boxes of dialysate fluid and supplies and complexity in the use. And so when we think back to what it takes to get there, first and foremost, I would say really understanding the unmet user need and really going out. And I attribute this to our CEO, Leslie Trigg. She was incredible out there in the beginning to really understand those user needs and visiting those patients to really understand what are the things that we can change to simplify this and reduce the complexity to drive more access for these patients. But then from there, it's no easy path. Our journey to develop Tableau took many, many, many years, about 8 years, to develop what in the lab was, really had all of the bones, but then to take it down and get it into a compact package that somebody would want to place in their home, where all you have to do is connect it to a regular tap. It uses tap water and plug it into an electrical outlet. Those sound simple, but to get it to that level of simplicity is where all the complexity is actually born. And as I alluded to in my opening, really building that user interface at every step of the way so that you're really creating accessibility for all ranges of patients. I mean, Tableau was created to be used at a 5th grade level so that it's guiding somebody every step of the way. So the complexity of the device is worth it if in the end you are creating the simplicity that the end user, in our case, the patient themselves, will really be able to grasp onto and will drive the success in the market and really drive the overall change.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it was Churchill who once said that out of great complexities, elegant simplicities will emerge. And I think that's what you're trying to achieve. I was going to think of there's a television show for those that are non-US, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? And I said, for Tableau, we can be a part of that show and we might actually be able to win. So I think that's great, because in order for us to be able to disseminate these solutions, right, broadly across the ecosystem into our patients, simplicity is key. So we appreciate that. Steve, similarly, what challenges did you have when you were trying to address issues for sort of peripheral nerve block catheter development?
I want to point out that for me, it's a journey in need, that it starts with need. And when we have 2 brilliant Virginia Mason anesthesiologists who are saying, yeah, I can put my patient under, but if they are seniors, they may experience at least a month of cognitive disruption. If they have a challenge with a mental impairment, it could go up to a year. That's what the data shows. And then more recently, when opioids are taking center stage, not just at Galien, but around the world in terms of changing lives, and we add to it now a route that makes street opioids also available, it's going to increase these numbers so dramatically. So when we can be present, what they wanted to do initially was if they could be present for creating a device which addresses the need to avoid opioid use for 5 days of at-home recovery, can reduce recovery times from 4 hours to 40 minutes, and can save the rest of the body from the ravages of indiscriminately applied general anesthesia. We want to do it. So I guess my thoughts really surround, it's just what Jennifer said. I couldn't agree with her more. You start with the need, you start with the patient. You don't start with the garage and the tool. You start with the patient and you say, what can I do to make this life better? And in the end of the day, it's the patient you're working for, and that's where the payoff is. Simplicity, cost effectiveness. If you're not an order of magnitude less costly than the next device, you probably won't make it to the marketplace. So you have to address so many factors in your development that really takes some time and some creativity and some thoughtfulness. I think that gets to the heart of why you do it, and basically, how you emerge from a mass of ideas out there that people have. People think you should have this. They think you should have that. Well, frankly, if it's already here and we can keep people off of opioids because they can transition directly from Soladex facile catheter to ibuprofen, I'm there every day.
I get it. And I really appreciate what you both said, because I think ourselves and perhaps our webinar colleagues that are with us today realize, boy, there seems to be a lot of inventions that are looking for a market. And what you're saying is it's really 180 degrees opposite. Identify the market. We need to identify the need and then strive for a solution, right? So, and I think that's really important for all of us, particularly in the tech space, that you don't start, as you say, Steve, in the garage. You start with what is the problem, like the why, as is said. As you start with the why, then we can sort of figure out the what and the how. And so I appreciate you both saying that, because I think it's really important that we address that. You know, a comment I sometimes think about in healthcare, at least in the United States, I'll say this with sort of air quotes, but in many ways, the primary regulatory mechanism of healthcare is really reimbursement. And right, because if you're not going to get reimbursed for it, it's going to be hard for that product or service or solution to be either widely adopted or accepted. So my question to you, and maybe this time I'll start with you, Steve, so Jennifer has more time to think about this as well. But, you know, at what time frame, or did you really think about the reimbursement strategy in terms of, you know, as you were developing the product? When did you start thinking about reimbursement, and how did you go about sort of looking at the reimbursement strategies for your product?
You know, I couldn't agree more with your reimbursement comment, because without reimbursement, none of us would be here, period. It requires a return for the effort we put in this for the stakeholders involved. We're fortunate in that our timing is sort of a perfect storm of concern over opioid addiction, abuse disorder. We're fortunate that the Senate or the President signed into law at the end of last year an enhancement for reimbursement for any technology, and that covers all of our fields and others that are listening, that avoids or stems opioid abuse disorder. That's a very heartening event, because that strikes at the very thing that allows us to propagate quickly and attract more to it. As long as old style reimbursements are there for ancient technologies, we have to sort of brush those aside in some way. We need the support of Medicare and Medicaid to fully develop and propagate these ideas.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, similar.
Yeah, on from the dialysis space, in some ways, I feel like Tableau was really pulling the market closer and closer to home to say with ease of use. We have been fortunate, and we are excited about the future because we do see more and more of the reimbursement trends drive towards value-based care that can be moved closer into the home. And we actually see that in the dialysis space. So the ETC model, is a treatment choices model that really values growing more and more patients going home. CMS had a new add-on payment to ponies is sort of the abbreviation for it. That Tablo was awarded. We're in our second year of that. And that was really to do exactly that, to spur the adoption of technology for home dialysis that really showed a clinical differentiation and a substantial differentiation over incumbent technology to really enable those providers to be driving towards new technology, because the technology is coming, it's meeting the market need, and yet, the big barrier is the barrier to change. And if you don't have reimbursement and you don't have the incentives lined up to help drive that technology forward, that can be a real challenge. So again, I feel like we've been really fortunate, and we continue to push on innovative technology as a way that will help reduce the cost of care and also improve the quality when you're able to move that care for these patients into their home.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as you're devolving, iterating your products, how do you stay ahead of sort of the regulatory changes and sort of the evolving healthcare standards? Is that a challenge, Jennifer, for Tablo as dialysis changes, or
we have many regulators. So when you say regulator, the first thing that comes to my mind is actually the FDA. And I think the FDA has made incredible strides relative to cybersecurity and all of their new guidances that they put out. And so, Outset as a company and really driving Tablo from an innovative perspective, we continue to just move forward with meeting all of the new guidances and really staying ahead. I think it's important to see that companies are continuing to file their 510Ks on a regular basis and continuing to stay current and move that technology forward, and really use that as an enabler, because innovation really is our lifeblood. And that's what our providers and that's what our patients are expecting from us. And so for us, the sort of regulatory environment is something that we exist in and embrace and use it as a catalyst, quite frankly, sometimes to just create larger sort of competitive moat as we continue to stay ahead.
Any thoughts about that, Steve? Or I guess
again, Jennifer's taking the words right out of my mouth, but I think you think of the FDA, and I think I've spent the last year and a half exposing the rest of the world to Soladex Facile, and I've grown to appreciate the FDA enormously. I think the straightforward process, asking relevant questions, not constructing every answer to every gray rhino or black swan that could possibly happen. I think they're doing a reasonably good job doing that. And so how do I approach regulators? I approach them first. I get in early. What do you expect of me as I move this forward? How do I not waste time and investor money and clinical time and patients' efforts to get it there? So I like an early touch. And I think that's another advantage, actually, that we have in the United States over some other system. I'm not going to name them, but they can get very, 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 very challenging. The other thing is it's not affected by a lot of side businesses that allow you to have access, because straightforward access, directly talking to the FDA is something that a lot of companies might be reluctant to do. But I think, Jennifer, you might agree with me on this, Jennifer, but I think you go there and you say, look, here's my pre-submission. What do you think? Where do I go from here? And hear it from them and directly. So your plans, your involvement, your device moves in direction that can be approved.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And I would encourage those companies that are working in this space. And I really mean it, our relationships with the FDA and Medtech have been really quite positive. They're there to help you. And so instead of sort of wasting time and reinventing the wheel, it probably is worth reaching out early, whether you start with consultants or you go directly to the FDA itself, which I would probably suggest, which you're probably stating as well, Steve, because they really are there to help you. They serve a purpose. Now, they are regulators, and so there's hurdles that us in the medtech industry have to cross, but that they're really here to help us cross those hurdles so that we can bring, as my colleague likes to say, the best products to patients. And to go back to some earlier comments, what I also would encourage medtech innovators and inventors and entrepreneurs is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the product, the service, or solution. Then we get it done. Then we say, okay, now let's think about the reimbursement strategy. And that can take a whole number of years. So I think it's important that as you're developing your products, that in parallel, not only are you iterating the development of your product, but you're beginning from day one almost thinking about those reimbursement strategies and opportunities so that your product can be widely adopted, accepted, and utilized. Otherwise, you're going to take a few extra, potentially years, until you see it really take hold in the marketplace. And so I applaud you both for the work that you've done along those lines and trying to get that done. And I think for other innovators to look back at your stories and see how did Tableau and Soladex Facile sort of get things rolling. And as you said, Jennifer, it doesn't happen overnight. It took you 8 years of work. So it always, people say, this happened overnight, and there it is, but no one really sort of sees all the blood, sweat, and toil that it took for the 9 years or 8 years it took before. And then all of a sudden, here's this product. So I do appreciate that. I was kind of thinking along these lines is, collaboration knows no borders, no boundaries, but I think it's at times only through those strategic and collaborative partnerships that allow us to really unlock the opportunities that the products have. Did you guys, when you were inventing your products, and partner with other companies or research institutions? I know, Steve, you probably with obviously both with healthcare providers, but can you help us understand how you approached collaboration and with whom and when, as you were beginning to develop your products? And maybe Jennifer, I can start with you on that, the concept of collaboration and product development.
Sure. So the genesis of Tableau was actually really a bit of tech that enabled water purification to happen from a simple tap connection, right? Connecting to your drain, to your sink. And so that piece was really an unlocking moment that could then solve a number of challenges. But in order to effectively do that, I would say the vast majority of collaboration really came in working directly with patients and directly with providers to dig in, as I was saying earlier, to those unmet needs. I had an opportunity to speak with one of the providers that was one of our earliest, sort of saw it, we used to call it the nursery where each Tableau was birthed, and really saw it back then because there was so much where those providers were providing their hands-on sort of imprint into what we would ultimately land with when we commercialized the product coming into 2018. So I would say for us, that collaboration has primarily been, again, very focused on the patient and the provider. With that said, though, obviously, in starting a company and commercializing a product for the first time, I would also say that your collaboration runs deep with all of your suppliers and really getting your operations up and running, which was, another big thing. We started with a contract manufacturer in the very beginning and are proud to now manufacture all of our products ourselves as our company has continued to grow. So our collaboration has sort of changed as the evolution and the success and growth of the product has grown.
So can I just ask, as you went from discover to validation, who are your collaborative partners for validating the Tableau device?
Again, primarily providers. So really making sure that we were going to be hitting the mark. And then a lot, quite frankly, with patients, because human factors, as you can imagine, with a device like this that is delivering a life-saving treatment and will be operated by a patient at home without a nurse present or another HCP present, that really requires a level of human factors that really is just so simple and easy to use and is so intuitive for that user to be successfully using the device.
And I guess I should have, was that more on the sponsored research side for creation, or was that on the co-development side with your
more on the product development side?
Product development side.
Yep.
Steve, I guess a similar question about collaboration, and I kind of can get it from your product. You know, there was a user said, "Hey, I need a better catheter to place in a much shorter period of time."
Yeah, I think it would shock patients to see what the throughput of an ambulatory surgical center is in a day. It won't surprise the surgeons and it won't surprise the anesthesiologists, but that gives rise to a lot of innovations. You raised the issue of collaborations, and I have to say that in our evolution, there were like 3 areas where we got collaboration. Perhaps the most important one is clinics, mostly sports medicine clinics that step up and say, you know, we need to make a change. We understand this perfectly. This person has to get back on the ski slope tomorrow, and or the next day. We have to get him back there so we can win a medal. We were born in Colorado Springs, so that was first on our minds. You know, we had the Olympic Training Center and all that going on. But to find doctors who are essentially doing one patient at a time all day long, and to watch their enthusiasm to be involved with something that can scale and impact large populations of patients is something that's a thrill for them. As we move more towards recipe medicine and regulate higher and higher levels of regulated medicine, you know, it's wonderful to see that kind of opportunity come to these physicians. So my first area is, you know, the physicians themselves. They want this. I've never, I can't remember one that didn't want to scale what they could contribute to medicine. So that's a great place to start. The second is the clinics and situations in which you live have to agree to, you know, the clinical trials, the experiences that you have. And you know, and the third level of collaboration is manufacturing. Elon Musk says, you know, manufacturing is a hard problem. And I think Jennifer might even nod about that too. It's a hard problem. It's hard to get it right, and it's hard to get it right every time. And I think finding the right people who can collaborate either from an intellectual perspective or from a contract manufacturer perspective are key. So those are the 3 areas that are, you know, the greatest concern: the patients, the clinics, and the manufacturing facilities. In our situation.
I'm glad you brought up. Oh no, sorry. I'm glad you brought up the manufacturing. We sometimes call that the last mile in tech, right? You're there, and then you got to get to the manufacturing and scale, and you go, okay, how am I going to do that? So again, similar on the reimbursement, the development, you sort of have to think about as well, manufacturing and scale and getting those partners correct. And it's probably going to not be it may, hopefully it is, but may not necessarily be your first collaborative partner in that space that tends to take it to that scale. But no, I appreciate that. I'm glad you brought that up, Steve, because that's a very important point. Jennifer, I know Tableau and a sort of a question around data and data privacy considerations, because I know Tableau is one of the advantages is its sort of ability to gather data, automate some of those, shall we say, mundane provider tasks that of charting and those sorts of things. So in this sort of age of data-driven healthcare, how did Tableau sort of address concerns related to data privacy and security? And maybe you can give us some of the You mentioned it very briefly around that to the FDA, but how that kind of worked for you around the data acquisition and accumulation side of Tableau.
Yeah, so one of the, again, back to the patient, when you're driving towards that simplicity, in order to get that simplicity, there's all of this complexity behind it. And one of those examples would be all of the sensor-based technology on Tableau. So there are over 70 sensors that are constantly watching to monitor what is going on and to be able to trigger and let that user know what they need to do, so that they can continue with their treatment, so that they are getting the right alarms. Then those sensors not only are helping the user in that moment, they are also then sending hundreds of thousands of data points back to the cloud, about what is going on with those treatments, how are the systems doing. And so what I would say is Tableau was developed from the beginning, not as a product, but as an ecosystem where the data coming off of the system, the ability to communicate back to the cloud, the ability to integrate to the electronic medical record, all of those weren't sort of afterthoughts. They were part of the original equation. So, privacy, security, cybersecurity, product security, those things were really built into the device. Because there was always this notion of the complete ecosystem that we wanted to enable to unlock, again, ease of use for the patient, but also real-time information that is coming back to the clinicians, that they can see what's going on with the treatment. So all of that really, I think, was an underpinning. And I've worked in other devices where we've had to add those things on later. It is much harder to add them on later when they are not contemplated from the beginning. So I think that was also another really pivotal choice that was made, that this isn't a product. This is part of a connected ecosystem that we are creating. And so we'll build it with that in mind.
And I apologize for the naive question, Jennifer, but does Tableau connect directly into EHR?
It can. So Tableau can directly send. So we've been talking a lot about the patient here, but Tableau is actually an enterprise solution that can be used all the way from the hospital to home. So this can be used in the ICU. It can be used across the acute care setting. So if you think about a nurse, one of the most significant time sort of lost time that nurses spend is really on documentation. And so we can integrate directly to the electronic medical record, sending all of that treatment data down into the EMR, saving the nurse all of that manual documentation so that they can review all of the data that's come in and then be able to save that into the patient's record. So in the acute care setting, very valuable time saver for the nurse, also increases accuracy of documentation. And then on the patient side, again, you have a patient at home, you have a provider in a clinic, and having that clinic be able to access in real time and understand what's going on with that patient's treatment. Did they complete their treatment today? Are we seeing the treatment adherence that we need? Do we need to contact that patient from a compliance perspective? So again, that data really fuels so much more than just the delivery of a treatment.
And how much sort of a calorie expenditure, for lack of a better phrase, does Tableau have to utilize for EHR integration? Like, is for companies that are really require EHR integration, can you give us some insights into some of those challenges, or maybe they're not challenges for Tableau?
Yeah, it's super lightweight. Relatively speaking, I would say. I came from another Medtech company before that was a much larger integration into the EHR. This is what I would call a small size integration to be able to send this data over, that will really improve the experience for the nurse, which at the end of the day, technology is adopted when users find it easy to use and quite intuitive. And so if you can remove things like documentation burden and you can really create that simplicity, users are very much going to vote with their time which technology they're going to choose. So these EHR integrations are just another way that we can really simplify the overall experience when providers or patients are using Tableau.
And I appreciate that, because as a provider, we often say that I like to say that for any sort of new innovation to be widely accepted or adopted, it has to be equal or exceeded by an innovation in workflow, right? Because everyone says, oh, this just takes 2 minutes, and that just takes 3 minutes, and that just takes 1 minute. But you add those 2, 3, 5 minutes, it's another 15 minutes per visit, just in those, just do this, just do that. It's sort of the 3 words I think providers might hate the most. It's, can you just? Yeah. So we really appreciate some of that engagement. So Steve, I was thinking about the catheter, and maybe a little bit for you too, Jennifer, but this is about sort of sustainability and environmental responsibilities, and to some extent, with the products that you create, some of them are just, they're disposable products to some extent. How do you sort of address some of those sustainability issues in the production of your products? Or do you think about that? Did that come up when regulators were taking a look at it? Was that one of the little check boxes that they looked at for your catheter, Stephen, as they were going through this, or how did that become addressed?
Sustainability has been a centerpiece for much of innovation. Sometimes it's applied like frosting on a cake. Other times it's part of the fabric. I would say that the basic theme I'm hearing here too, Dr. Lester, is things are going home. So while sustainability is an issue for a small piece of polymer that might be discarded, a small tube, it's avoiding days of hospital stay, hours of hospital or doctor's visits, and the follow-up is there. When a patient after 5 days under a telephone call removes a catheter, and returns the infusion pump to the manufacturer for requalification, I can't help but think that the time spent in the pain clinic talking to the pain specialists that are attached to the surgeon, the time spent in the hospital, all the coverage, all the waste, it really has to be looked at in the larger ecosystem for us. And I think that's where it occurs in our particular situation. Can't ignore it. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to make it accessible, to have an idea that's so powerful that it can reach the poorest people in India or Africa and still be within their reach. And that's been part of our mission. Sustainability has got to address what we're doing today, particularly in the United States with hospitals and hospital care. And it's, believe it or not, it's even worse in certain places with stays. So that's how I would frame it. To stay just with the device and the garbage can might not be the whole solution. It has to. You have to include the drapes, the gloves, the efforts, the beds, the bedding. Everything that happens to support a patient elsewhere. Going home is the answer, and that seems to be a common theme here.
Agreed. Jennifer, any thoughts?
I'll pick up on that and say, because that's exactly where we're rooted. Obviously, there's many things that we are doing from a sustainability perspective. I mentioned our manufacturing, but I think to sort of connect back to the purpose of this session specifically, it's really about how we're advocating for equitable access to dialysis care. And we believe that we can improve patient outcomes, we can improve the patient experience, we can improve the cost of care, and we can even improve the provider experience as we create more equitable access to enable those patients to be able to go home. And I mentioned some of the, we're very fortunate. There are different reimbursement tailwinds that are aligned towards this. But, the healthcare system in general, the delivery model that we've experienced has to change. It has to change in order. We cannot continue to exist in the way we are if we want to see such radical and fundamental change as driving more and more patients to be able to successfully care for themselves in their home. Technology is an enabler, it's a component of that. But it is really going to take, in my opinion, and I think as our company often talks about, an industry movement. This is an industry movement. We believe we are an enabler in that movement. And we believe that we are participating in a way that will drive that movement forward faster than it probably would have gone had we not been able to bring the level of innovation in the dialysis space that we brought.
Oh, I love that, because what's really driving this are the consumer trends in healthcare, right? It's what does the consumer really want? We talk about point of care, but in this case, we may call this remote point of care, or really at home treatment, or at home diagnostics, at home pain management. So I really do appreciate that, because we see that in the future. And that's what I think in many ways inspires me about tech. And you said it earlier, Steve, you said it as well. Tech really can provide a true equity dimension to healthcare. Jennifer and I, Steve, we had a few minutes as you had to run off earlier on to sort of broach this discussion, right? When you have a piece of technology, a device, a service, a solution, that can really be disseminated globally and widely adopted. So it is inspiring. And whether it's a software or a hardware solution, or a mixture of both, then they become imminently connected and updatable. And so it's a fun thing, the space that we all work in, which is in medical technologies, and to watch the growth and innovation. We just have a couple of minutes, but I was sort of interested, and maybe for others that will be listening to our experts here, as you're developing medical technologies, what sort of KPIs does your company use to measure the success and impact of your medtech solutions? So if I'm developing a medical tech solution, I'm trying to think about what would be some of those important KPIs you think I should be looking at or thinking about for my company. Maybe I can start with you, Steve.
I think if you're looking at what's important, I mean, you really have to go back to the patient and go back to what I said earlier. When a surgeon can manage a process that took 3 people that now do, or an anesthesiologist with just 2 hands, instead of having this massive staff, our goal is to see staff deployed more widely to improve the rate at which physicians are burning out and perplexed because things are taking too long and too cumbersome. I think for us, our situation, pain is probably the most simple. There's nothing subjective about the way pain occurs, post-surgical pain occurs. Everyone knows they have it. It's a great degree. If you ask anesthesiologists why they got into what they do, they have a very interesting answer. And they say it's magic to remove pain. Yeah. And I think I don't think we could get any better objective than that.
Yeah, I liked your phrase at the beginning, pink faces instead of white ones. So I really appreciate that, because you're all pale from the vagal influences of pain. So that was a nice statement one of your anesthesiologists or surgeons said. I think we have about 2 minutes. I'm going to ask Jennifer one question, then I'll leave you each with the thought of maybe just wrapping up for 1 minute. So Steve, you're going to get a sense to make a final comment that you would like to make to medtech innovators, inventors, and entrepreneurs. And Jennifer, I'll begin by asking you, just initially, what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs and innovators who are looking to make their mark in the medical or in the medtech industry?
I think you will always have a number of stakeholders that you will be trying to serve and you will be trying to appease. And you need to get crystal clear on who your primary stakeholder is. And the reason that I think Steve and I are both on this call is because we're really clear it's the patient. And when you have that clarity in your stakeholder hierarchy and you know where the patient is, it's surprising how much easier it is to make every single decision when you really understand what that hierarchy of stakeholders looks like.
Yeah, well said. Steve?
Well, I like what you said about the stakeholders because it's not for the faint of heart to commence an innovation in our economy in these days and go forward. And I was briefly a professor teaching an entrepreneurship class in a graduate school, and I always was perplexed about one big question: are you born to this, or is it your ability to take risk, or you just come to this because you think you can think your way around it? And I'm still not, I don't really have a good answer for that. But what I do know is my thoughts are think big. Think about reaching all the patients, thinking about solving big problems with elegant solutions. And when I say think big, it's so easy to go into your cubbyhole and visit with a scientist and get excited and find out that, that's where your attention goes. Jennifer pointed to a constellation of stakeholders, and you need to get out and really mix. Zoom doesn't always do it. See patients. Patients will drive you forward. Do you agree, Jennifer? Patients, when you look in their faces and say, "Oh, I don't have to sit there all day in the hospital," I'm sure they're very excited about what you can bring. So I think that's where I would go.
It's appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a motto that at the clinic where we work, which is to think big, just like you said, but to start small and to move fast, and to then quickly be able to translate as best we can your ideas into action. So I love the comments. I just want to say, as we wait for Matthew, we'll put up the poll results in just a minute, so everyone will have a chance to hang in there and see the results from the poll at the beginning. How honored I am to have the opportunity to be here with you, Jennifer and Stephen, and to have the opportunity to discuss and share a lot about your products. Congratulations to both of you and your companies. You're an inspiration to all that are involved in healthcare, trying to bring new products to patients. Maybe I think we might have missed our timing there on the poll, but the poll had just come up. And I wish you all the very, very best of luck tomorrow night at the forum. I think that I just want to make sure that the audience realizes that Thursday's forum will begin around 7:30. If you're here, with a CEO roundtable presentation of the 2023 Roy Vageles Award at around 6:30, followed by the dinner at the American Museum of Natural History. So to all, congratulations, and thank you very much for taking the time today to engage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.